Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Sacred Place Live, our weekly live stream for Sacred Place. I need my water, sorry. And yes, I got a new Mickey water bottle for Christmas. Today is our annual meeting if you're not joining us on Zoom right now. So that's happening shortly. So I'm going to keep our live stream and reflection time as short as possible so that we can get on with our business and not keep everyone until 2 o'clock. Trying to stick to our noon time as close as we can. So today we're finishing up our series from the Gospel of John, Light Revealed, because Lent starts next week. March 2nd will be our Ash Wednesday, which I haven't announced that yet, apparently. We'll gather at about 6 o'clock. Should be a good time. I'll send that email out today. Confirm with my husband that we're good with that time. But yeah, about 6 o'clock on Wednesday. I invite you to come up with some water for that. I'll remind everyone via email and the text message. But so that's coming up on Wednesday for Ash Wednesday. And we have a long scripture passage today. Today is Transfiguration Sunday, but we have a slightly different story because the Transfiguration does not appear anywhere in the Gospel according to John. It's just in the 3 synoptic Gospels of Matthew, Mark, and Luke. So we will look at a slightly different story than we normally would on this day. But this whole series has been about how through Christ, the light of the world is revealed, the light of God. And I think that fits well with where this story will take us. So I want to begin with these words from the Gospel according to John. Now, it's long, so I'm not going to put all the text on the screen. I'll read it as clearly as I can and make sure that everything is good for us. Okay. From the Gospel according to John chapter 9 in its entirety. As Jesus walked along, he saw a man who was blind from birth. Jesus' disciples asked, "Rabbi, who sinned so that he was born blind, this man or his parents?" He answered, "Neither he nor his parents. This happened so that God's mighty works might be displayed in him. While it's daytime, we must do the works of him who sent me. Night is coming when no one can work. While I am here in the world, I am the light of the world." After he said this, he spit on the ground, made mud with saliva, and smeared the mud on the man's eyes. Jesus said to him, "Go, wash in the pool of Siloam." This word means sent. So the man went away and was washed. When he returned, he could see. The man's neighbors and those who used to see him when he was a beggar said, "Isn't this the man who used to sit and beg?" Some said, "It is," and others said, "No, it's someone who looks like him." But the man said, "Yes, it is me." So they asked him, "What does this mean?" So they asked him, "How are you now able to see?" He answered, "The man they called Jesus made mud, smeared it on my eyes, and said, 'Go to the pool of Siloam and wash.' So I went and washed, and then I could see." They asked, "Where is this man?" He replied, "I don't know." Then they led the man who had been born blind to the Pharisees. Now Jesus made the mud and smeared it on the man's eyes on a Sabbath day. So the Pharisees asked him how he was able to see. The man told them, "He put mud on my eyes, I washed, and now I see." Some Pharisees said, "This man isn't from God because he breaks the Sabbath law." Others said, "How can a sinner do miraculous signs like these?" So they were divided. Some of the Pharisees questioned the man who had been born blind again. "What do you have to say about him since he healed your eyes?" He replied, "He's a prophet." The Jewish leaders didn't believe the man had been blind and received his sight until they called for his parents. The Jewish leaders asked him, "Is this your son? Are you saying he was born blind? How can he now see?" His parents answered, "We know he's our son We know he was born blind, but we don't know how he now sees. And we don't know who healed his eyes. Ask him. He's old enough to speak for himself." His parents said this because they feared the Jewish authorities. This is because the Jewish authorities had already decided that whoever confessed Jesus to be the Christ would be expelled from the synagogue. That's why his parents said, "He's old enough, ask him." Therefore they called a second time for the man who'd been born blind, and said to him, "Give glory to God. We know this man is a sinner." The man answered, "I don't know whether he is a sinner. Here's what I do know. I was blind, and now I see." They questioned him, "What did he do to you? How did he heal your eyes?" He replied, "I already told you, and you didn't listen. Why do you want to hear it again? Do you want to become his disciples too?" They insulted him. "You are his disciple, but we are Moses' disciples. We know that God spoke to Moses, but we don't know where this man is from." The man answered, "This is incredible. You don't know where he is from, yet he healed my eyes. We know that God doesn't listen to sinners. God listens to anyone who is devout and does God's will. No one has ever heard of a healing of the eyes of someone born blind. If this wasn't a man from God, he couldn't do this." They responded, "You were born completely in sin. How is it that you dare to teach us?" And they expelled him. Jesus heard that they had expelled the man born blind. Finding him, Jesus said, "Do you believe in the human one?" He answered, "Who is he, sir? I want to believe in him." Jesus said, "You have seen him. In fact, he is the one speaking with you." The man said, "Lord, I believe," and he worshipped Jesus. Jesus said, "I have come into the world to exercise judgment so that those who don't see can see, and those who see will become blind." Some Pharisees who were with him heard what he said. "Surely we aren't blind, are we?" they asked. Jesus said to them, "If you were blind, you wouldn't have any sin. But now that you say we see, your sin remains." And now I invite you to reflect on these words during this song.
When he took the 3 disciples to the mountainside to pray, his countenance was mortified, his clothing was aflame. 2 men appeared, Moses and Elijah came. They were at his side. The prophecy, the legislation spoke of whenever he would die. Then there came a word of what he should accomplish on the day. Then Peter spoke to make of them a tabernacle place. A cloud appeared in glory as an accolade. They fell on the ground. A voice arrived, the voice of God, the face of God covered in a cloud. What he said to them, the voice of God, the most beloved Son. Consider what he says to you. Consider what's to come. The prophecy was put to death, and so will the Son. And keep your word, disguise the vision till the time is come. La da da da, da 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 da, da 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 da, da da da, lost in the cloud. A voice, have no fear, we draw near, Lord. cloud, a sign, Son of God, turn your ear, lost in the cloud, a voice, Lamb of God, we draw near, lost in the cloud, a sign, Son of Man, Son of God, la da da da, da 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 da, da da da, la da da da, da 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 da.
So this isn't the traditional story we would read on Transfiguration Sundays I shared earlier. But I find some similarities in the way that Jesus is revealed. The light of Transfiguration comes when he's with the disciples, who, though they have been with him, have a hard time understanding and seeing who he is. And in this moment, they find the connection to the story of their people, their ancestry, and in that find the fulfillment of the prophecy of the Messiah. And even if they may not fully get it yet, that's a moment that they see who Jesus really is in some way. Sorry, Siri decided to do something. This story is still about seeing in a more even literal sense than the traditional Transfiguration story. So we have Jesus doing some healing on the Sabbath, which is a big no-no. And we have some transitions from blindness to seeing and from seeing to blindness. One of the textual things to consider here in the Greek text, there's something that's been possibly added. The nuances of the way this gets translated aren't always amazing. Even here in this version, it's better but not great. What comes across in the beginning is that this man was born blind so that God's work could be displayed in him. And that's really not the nuance of the original text from what I've read and from what other commentators would say, and even on the podcast for this text this week. But rather, Jesus doesn't really quite answer the question. I mean, Jesus is good at not answering questions. He instead talks about what it means to see, and that what he's called to do is the works of God. And then he does that. And he declares himself to be the light of the world. And, one thing that's interesting about light is that light is something that reveals. It shows us what is around us. But, if you've been indoors, like in a dark movie theater or in somewhere that's not so bright, and come out into the light, it blinds you at first. You have to shield your eyes. And, Noah, often when we come out from the house, he's a sun sneezer. So the sun will make him sneeze when he comes out into the light. Apparently it's a genetic thing. I don't have that gene, but apparently Noah does. So light does something to us when it reveals things to us. Sometimes it makes it where we can see, and sometimes it makes it where we can't see at first. And we see that throughout this story, this encounter with Jesus and this man who was born blind, and then the Pharisees as they investigate this thing. Because it happened on the Sabbath, which was even doing a healing would have been seen as work which was prohibited. And so there's a bit of an inquisition. And what I find interesting is the man who was born blind and can now see is the one who is being questioned here. And those who are expected to be able to see, the Pharisees, these leaders, find themselves in a bit of spiritual blindness. They can't see that God is working. And They are blinded by their own legalism and caught up in their own worldviews in ways that don't allow them to truly see. In the proclamation of who Jesus is, they begin, the blind man calls him rabbi. And then that same man before the Pharisees calls Jesus a prophet. And eventually, when he comes back to Jesus and Jesus asks him about belief in the human one, he responds with belief and calls Jesus Lord. So there is the revelation of Jesus as the light of the world here, of who Jesus is. That's really the big point of these stories from the Gospel according to John. But it's also about who doesn't see, who doesn't understand. And so often the structures we place around us, the boxes we try and use to define things, because we are people who are meaning makers. We try and understand. And we see that even at the beginning of this text with trying to understand why this man was born blind, because of the idea that, retribution, that form of justice, was common in their way of thinking. And we accidentally subscribe to that, I think, all the time. When something bad happens, we try and figure out why it happened and find fault in it, when sometimes that's just not the way it is. Jesus, addresses that indirectly, because he never addresses things quite directly, because usually the question people are asking is not the question they need to be asking. It doesn't really matter why this man was born blind. That's just a given. He was born blind. He is blind. What is important is that healing needs to happen. So looking outside of our own understanding, we can see what God is doing, the work that God is doing through Jesus here. Something that the Pharisees couldn't see. And through the discourse, there are questions of, is this man a sinner, or is he someone who is good and doing healing? And most of the Pharisees want to say he's a sinner because he's doing work on the Sabbath, but the others ask, how can a sinner do miraculous signs like these? And they even ask the man, what do you say about him? And that's when he says, he's a prophet. I don't know how he did this. I just know that I was blind and now I'm not. So he understands that God is working through this person, this human one that we know as Jesus, and is willing to be open to that, is willing to believe in what God is doing, that life is the most important thing. Giving life is work that is not even just allowed, but encouraged even on the Sabbath. That bringing healing and wholeness to people is more important than the constraints we'd place around ourselves, the boxes we try and place even God in. The light which shines in the darkness breaks down those boundaries. Sometimes it overwhelms us, but often it helps us to see. And that is the good news for us, that the light of the world has shone in our lives and reveals to us even the things we don't want to see sometimes, sure, but we can open our eyes and look beyond ourselves and the boundaries and borders we place around ourselves physically, and also, metaphorically around ourselves, which boundaries and borders is a difficult concept right now. I think I probably said that without even thinking, because of what's going on in Ukraine right now. The worldviews we have so often confine us to not seeing the good work of God around us. I can't address all that's going on with the situation in Eastern Europe, but I would hope that people would begin to look beyond the things which define who we are and see each other as worthy of love, of light and kindness, which seems to be missing so often in the world and even in our own country. The divisions around all of the things, not just this, but all sorts of things, lead to a blindness of not being able to see. I would hope and pray for a world where blindness is no more and that we can truly see. I have a song for us to reflect on that.
Watch over us. Watch over us. My hands are tied. My strength is gone. Mama, your baby shrouded in sorrow. You've had your time, but who has tomorrow? So watch over us, watch over us. Father, your sickness lives here in me. Don't need no crown, don't need no glory. You've had your life, that ain't my story. Sometimes I'm up, sometimes I'm down, sometimes I'm almost level to the ground. But my baby's sleeping, sleeping in peace. So watch over us, watch over us. So watch over us, watch over us.
So, the ways that light come to us are different depending on where we are in our life. I know the world needs more light than it has. And I pray that the work that we do together, the reason we exist together as Sacred Place, would bring more light into the world. That's why we dedicate ourselves to the work of justice, inclusion, and family, and keep that as our focus so that the ways we feel called to be light bringers would be realized in our community and world. I wish you joy and light in this coming week, wherever the dark places are. May you help bring light to them, even if it's just in small ways. I know our reflection time is a little shorter today, but we have the business of being a church to get to as well. So I will leave you with this blessing. Remember that God is with you. God is for you, and God refuses to be God without you. And may all God's people say amen. I hope to see you back here for Sacred Place Live whenever you're able to join us. We'll do Wednesday evening live streamed, and we'll talk after that about when it might be safe for us to gather again together in person for our hybrid gatherings. But whatever happens, whatever we decide, we will still be here next Sunday at 11 a.m. for our live stream and 10:30 on Zoom. I hope you will join us, because always this is your sacred place.